please subscribe. What do you think about the future of BRICS? Can the BRICS become as an alternative or even enemy of NATO?
Well, I think, Pavel, this is a $1 trillion question right now.
Yes.
I think we still don't know what's going to happen to BRICS because, of course, BRICS now it's leaving some sort of contradictions internally.
Yes.
You have Iran being attacked by U.S. and Israel, but also reacting against the Emirates, which have bases of U.S., have data centers, have all infrastructure that U.S. is using to attack Iran.
Huge financial hub.
Exactly, a huge financial hub, and so this I think is going to be a contradiction. I think also the position of India is not so clear. India is more quiet during these last weeks. But we know that India, for instance, like 2 days before the beginning of the war, Modi was in Israel, visiting the Knesset, hugging, kissing, and all because India is the mother of civilization, Israel is the father, these kind of things that probably sounded a little bit, I would say, not so nice in Tehran. So we don't know what's going to happen to BRICS. But I think we can also maybe think that this is a moment, a crossroads moment for BRICS, where maybe some consensus, some red lines should be established, which means, I can give you an example. There is many discussions, as you know, in BRICS about building alternatives to the dollar hegemony. Payment systems, grain exchange, other sorts of financial cooperation. But we know there, for instance, India and Emirates are two countries that usually in the last couple of years, they vetoed the progresses of these initiatives. So at the end of the day, I think what's happening now, it's sort of like some of the internal contradictions that we had in BRICS are being externalized by the war. So I think it's a moment that probably BRICS have to have some deeper discussions. But I still think that BRICS has a huge potential. There's many proposals, very interesting proposals like the grain exchange, international payment system, the contingent reserve arrangement, which is an alternative to IMF, and others initiatives that are being discussed but still not implemented. So maybe I think we are in a very special moment in history.
Before we will work about it, that could be some results. Okay,
Absolutely.
Okay, and another question. The NATO has a leader, it's United States.
Mm-hmm.
What about BRICS? They called it like a round table that everybody equal. Everyone equal, but now we see that China became the leader, and Iran the last week said that only China currency should be paid for the oil. Yes, it was a global scandal. It was a problem for the United States. How do you think? Is China ready to be the leader of BRICS and maybe become the alternative of NATO?
You mean BRICS becoming alternative for NATO?
Yes, and
China
can be China real enemy of the United States and the alternative for the third world be the new leader of world or half of the world?
Well, first of all, I don't think China wants to replace United States. If you ask any Chinese official, if you read all the statements, and I mean, I lived in China for 5.5 years, so I follow very closely the politics, Chinese politics, both domestically and internationally. They don't want to replace U.S. They don't want to be the next hegemon. They don't want to be the ruler of the world. Of course, China is huge, is the largest economy by far.
Does they say true, or why they don't replace the United States? Why?
Because I think it's not part of the Chinese culture to act as for instance, as an imperial country. I mean, of course, China is always pursuing its own interests, on benefits for its population, for its economy. But I can give you one example. So one of the main discussions we have right now in the world, and especially in the global south, is what to do with the critical minerals, right? It's absolutely strategic for everything, for this camera, the cell phone, everything around us has...
New technologies.
Exactly, new technologies. So one of the important minerals for that is nickel. Indonesia happens to be the largest reserve of nickel in the planet. And of course, China is the largest buyer by far. Indonesia has 26% of the reserves. Okay. So in 2020, like a few years ago, President Jokowi, the former president of Indonesia, he made a very important decision that, by the way, I think should be followed by all the countries in the global south. Jokowi said we're no longer exporting raw nickel outside of Indonesia because it doesn't make sense. We're not making enough money. It's a very low value added. So for now on, only processed industrialized nickel could be exported.
They just want to make money too.
Exactly. Well, China is the largest buyer. So what you think would happen if, with President Jokowi in Indonesia, if United States was the largest buyer of nickel?
Some kind of war and sanctions?
Or some kind of hybrid war operation and a coup d'etat in 6 months.
Color revolution?
Like they did in Iran in 1953 with Mossadegh. This is a classic thing. Well, what China did, sit and discuss and negotiate. Of course, they will try to get the most beneficial deal for them. But Jokowi told the Chinese, look, you guys are making a lot of money. Can we split a little bit more this pie? So if you want to keep buying our nickel, you establish industries, factories in China, in Indonesia, you process here, and then you get it. What China did, invested more than $30 billion in 2 mega complexes of processing nickel. There's still a lot of things that have to be improved, from environmental issues to labor issues. But the fact that from 2020, when Indonesia was making average $3 billion a year, the state of Indonesia, of the nickel, in 2023, they made $34 billion. So in 3 years, 11 times more. So I think this is the kind of deals that China apparently is willing to make with countries that behaves like sovereign countries, like Indonesia did, like my country Brazil did, for instance, with oil. We export a lot of crude oil to China, a lot of iron ore to China. I don't think this is a good deal for Brazil. But of course, China is not going to go to Brazil and say, hey guys, you should make more money. You should industrialize this. No, they are going to buy whatever Brazil sells. Brazil have to make this move and say, no, we need a better deal. So I think this is, and there's other examples, like Zimbabwe. China did the same with lithium in Zimbabwe, is doing the same with the lithium in Bolivia. So I think China, it's a major power, always wants the best for them, but they are willing to discuss and to negotiate with global South countries. So I think we should take this advantage. And regarding a question about NATO, I don't know, I think this is a good question as well. At some point, global South countries or the global majority countries will have to discuss some sort of military agreements because...
Yes, I don't want to be rude, but I will ask more straight. Donald Trump said once, or not once, that whole the American continent, North and Central and South, is United States backyard zone of American willing. And what if he will try to make aggression against Brazil? Should the BRICS or Russia or China, who will help support, protect Brazil from that kind of aggression? Does Brazilian experts, analytics institutions think about it, make some negotiations, preparations, and aside that question about can the third world war begin, and what will all we do? What should we do?
Sure.
How can we prevent this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't think we have the answer yet, but look, we had in the last few months, we had two major experiences with U.S. aggressions. One in Latin America with Venezuela, with President Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped by U.S. and Venezuela couldn't resist. And now we are having Iran, which is almost the opposite experience. U.S. is being defeated by Iran. So I think in the short term, maybe countries like Brazil maybe should try to get some sort of deals or some agreements, maybe with China or Russia or BRICS, to have some sort of defense. But I don't think that Brazil, a country like Brazil, should rely in other countries for its own security. Look at the example of Iran. What Iran is doing right now, people argue that there's some help from China, some help from Russia. We don't know because it's not public information. There's a lot of rumors. But the fact that the most important thing that Iran did was to make a long-term planning, headed by the state, by the revolutionary state, the Islamic Revolution, 30, 40 years ago. If Iran right now is able to challenge the empire and to defeat both US and the Zionists, is because they have been working a lot to develop their own defense mechanisms, their own defense system. So for instance, the first thing they did was to massify universities. Iran had in 1979, when the revolution happened, 170,000 students.
And in general, very effective government system.
You mean
Iran? Yes.
Exactly. But in 1979 they had 175,000 students at university. In 2015 they got almost 5 million. And they don't have a lot of resources. This is a country who now has $350 billion of GDP. It's a very low GDP. This is like South Africa GDP. And of course sanctioned for 47 years. So a lack of access to many of the most high-end technology. So what Iran did was to develop their own technologies, and they actually picked a few sectors of technology that they said we're going to be very good on these sectors. They picked nanotechnology. They are number 4, number 5 in the world right now. They picked biomedicine. Iran produces some medicines that even Europe isn't able to produce. Nuclear energy, with a lot of help from Russia, of course. Aerospatial and ballistic missiles. And they became very good on that. And Iran today, I don't know if you know these figures, but from the countries who train most number of engineers every year. First, China, of course. Second, Russia and US competing. Fourth, it's India. And fifth is Iran. Some years Japan might take over, but Iran is average the 5th country in the planet who trains more engineers.
Even with all the sanctions?
Even with all the sanctions, and let's remember that Iran has 90 million people. So if you compare the population with all the 4 countries, Iran per capita is the top one training engineers.
Extremely effective. Yeah.
Extremely effective. That's why this was like 40 years state planning. That's why they are able to defeat US right now. So I think Iran is teaching a lesson to the whole global south, at least for countries like Brazil. Of course, I don't know, Namibia cannot do that, but Brazil can do that. Indonesia can do that. Maybe South Africa can do that. Countries, big countries like regional powers, they can develop their own defense mechanism, but you need long-term planning. That's the biggest challenge for us, because we have elections at each 4 years and shift from one to another opposite political direction.
So for begin, we can make not military alliances, but science and education alliances, and develop ourselves.
Exactly. I think this is one of the things that especially China and Russia can help other countries. Not reacting in the case of a war, because this probably would trigger World War III, and I don't think China and Russia wants to enter a world war because of Brazil. They're not going to do that, as they didn't in the case of Venezuela, as they didn't in case of Iran. But They can help with technology, transfer of technology, education and agreements. I think this kind of things might be in mid-long term might be the solution for resisting the decreasing aggressive of the empire.
Brilliant speech, great ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
How